Focus on Abilities is brought to you by Tier Memorial Herman, redefining rehabilitation, removing barriers, re-enabling independence. In the ILRU Southwest ADA Center, promoting compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Welcome to Focus on Abilities, a program about issues affecting the lives of people with disabilities. I'm Lex Frieden. I'll be your host for today's program. I'm professor at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston, and I direct the Independent Living Research Utilization Program at Tier Memorial Herman. We're glad you joined us today. We have an interesting program and an interesting guest. I'll introduce our guest right after a short break, but first I want to ask you a question, one that we will answer before the end of today's program. That is, what is the anniversary date of the Americans with Disabilities Act? We'll be back with more in just a second. Thanks for joining us today for Focus on Abilities. I'm Lex Frieden. And our guest today is Toby Cole. Toby, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lex. Thanks for having me.
Now, Toby, you're an attorney?
I am.
Practicing here in Houston?
I am, yes, sir.
You have how many years experience in your craft?
I graduated and started practicing in 1998, so I'm embarrassed to say I'm coming up on my 16th year.
Wow. Toby, you obviously use a wheelchair.
Sure.
We make no efforts to disguise that on this program.
Sure.
When did you become disabled?
I broke my neck when I was 18, and I show my age when I tell people this, but it was 24 years ago. I had just graduated from high school. We were having a high school graduation party for me, and so we were playing a game that we had played growing up, and I tried to dive over my 6-foot uncle, and I'm 6'1", into 3 feet of water, and the math just doesn't work out real well. So I hit the bottom of the pool and
so instead of gliding along the top, you actually shot down and hit the bottom of the pool.
Yeah, the entire purpose of my dive was to try to not get touched by him. So I went straight up in the air.
You had a high arc.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And your whole family was there when that happened?
The entire family. My mom's the oldest of 10, and so it was a large group of people.
Your forehead hit the bottom of the pool.
Yeah.
Cracked your head back.
Yes.
Did you hear it snap?
No, I didn't. I didn't feel anything. I was wide awake the entire time, floated up to the top of the water face down, not in any pain, but I couldn't move anything.
So were you frightened?
No, I think I was more practical about it, because I remember looking down at the bottom and thinking, after a few seconds, you can't breathe water, but you know, I need to take a breath.
Had you ever been stunned before? I mean,
no. Never before. You know, it was very fortunate.
So your family obviously turned you over.
I was fortunate. Yes, they realized something was wrong. They turned me over, kept me stabilized in the pool till the paramedics got there.
So they kept you floating in the pool without moving you, trying to drag you up on the shore. Oh man, that was lucky.
My uncle put himself through his undergraduate degree and dental school as a lifeguard in Louisiana, and so he knew not to try to pull me out, and not to try to resuscitate me or whatever else. You know, you know as well as anybody, things go bad when they start to pull you out and sit you on a picnic table waiting for things to get better.
So the paramedics braced your neck, put you on a flat board, carried you to where?
Ben Taub.
Ben Taub,
yeah.
And what happened after that?
I was at Ben Taub. I was fortunate; I didn't have to have surgery, and so I was at Ben Taub. And
did they use tongs or a strap around your head?
They did. They used tongs initially when I was in ICU. They used tongs initially, and
tell the folks what that is.
Well, tongs are a traction device by which, when you're laying in bed, they need to stabilize your neck, and so basically, it's people don't see them anymore, but it's like tongs you use to pick up ice. And so they put them on each side of your head, and they put some weights on the top of your
calipers.
bed.
Did they drill a hole in your head to make them set, or did they use pressure?
Just pressure. They just use pressure.
Well, I have 2 holes in my head.
Do you really?
And they used, I'll swear, a drill that came right out of my grandfather's toolbox.
Wow, wow.
You could hear the bone crunching.
Oh goodness, yeah.
So
Fortunately,
you didn't have that experience, but the stretch, you feel like you're on the rack, right?
you are on the rack. That's exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
How long were you in that position?
Luckily, I was only there in NICU for about 3 or 4 days. They put me in a halo, which is a device that a ring goes around your head, and they do drill that, or at least pressure-wise, push it into the bone. Put me in a hard jacket with a halo, and they moved me onto a floor. My dad had heard about this place called TIR, and so every day he walked over the TIR and just said, "When can my son get in? When can my son get in?" And so within 9 days, they got me out of Bentob and got me over to TIR.
Who was your doctor there?
Dr. Donovan, Dr. D. Yeah.
That was fortuitous in some respects, but did you ever have any recovery from the moment your head hit the bottom of that pool? Did you ever experience any what they call recovery?
They told me when I got to Bentob that, and this is what they told everybody back then: you're going to be paralyzed, you'll never walk again, and you'll never have any recovery. In my case, they were right. I am a complete quadriplegic. I tell people I broke one bone in my body and I broke it right, because I don't have any movement in my arms or legs at all.
So that's interesting. The bone, did they do anything to stabilize the bone? They just left it in place and let it heal itself to the extent that it has?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My neurosurgeon was great. He said, if I go in there and fix it, it might look cosmetically better, but there's nothing that's going to cause any future damage, and so we'll just stabilize it.
So do you theorize that the spinal cord was actually severed when the head popped back and then everything jumped back into alignment?
Yeah, and that's what they explained to me from what they could tell in the x-rays, that it looked like a bone shard had actually pushed through the spinal cord and severed the spinal cord.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, 24 years ago, celebrating an occasion, 18 years old.
Yeah.
Well, what else do you have to remember about your young life?
I remember a lot about it, and I was always fortunate. When I got to TIR, they had a pediatric unit, so they had these little kids that were 6, 7 years old, 10 years old, driving around in wheelchairs. And I remember thinking how fortunate I was, because I didn't break my neck until after I'd graduated from high school. So I got to do all those milestones. I got to go register for the selective service after I turned 18. I got to go to prom. I got to have a girlfriend. I got to learn to drive. All those milestones that help make up your young part of your life before you transition to college. I was able to do that. Played basketball with my friends. Those type things.
So you don't necessarily regret not doing that today. You're joyful about the memories you have.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, I want to visit more with you, Toby, about your experience in rehabilitation and then afterwards. But we'll first take a break here.
Sure.
So please stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Toby Cole on HTV. This is Focus on Abilities. We're back with more on Focus on Abilities. I'm Lex Frieden, your host. Toby Cole is our guest today. And Toby, we've talked about you having an accident that changed your life.
Sure.
You were 18 years old. You went to rehabilitation. What were you planning to do before you broke your neck, and how did that change after you broke your neck?
I was planning to go to college. It's what you did in my family. After you graduated from high school, you went to college. So I was planning on doing that. Rehab kind of stopped me because I didn't get out of the hospital until after the first semester started. So I was hurt in June and didn't get out until early September. But I knew I still wanted to go to college. I didn't want to stay home and stay in bed. So I started in January the next semester. I started going to school at U of H, taking just a couple classes at a time.
And you didn't have a particular career goal at that point in time? Just your objective was to get a degree, right?
Yeah. Well, my objective was just not to stay at home. I didn't think about what I was going to do. I didn't think about what I wanted to do, and so I just started going to school, a couple classes, per semester, and then, I built up more strength, and I was taking 4 classes, and then I'd take a couple classes And then, a year went by, and then another year went by, and then
Do you run into any barriers at U of H in the early 1990s?
they were very accommodating. There were, of course, several buildings that weren't accessible, but they were very good about moving classes if I needed it. The floors were, the pebblestone made your chair vibrate until you spasmed. All those things. Doors weren't electric. But when you're 18 years old, everything's an adventure. So you don't think about it. And the Center for Students with Disabilities was very, very good about trying to make the university and the campus as accessible as
And you
possible.
were staying at your parents' home. That's where you were before you were injured, so there was no move involved at that point in time.
That's right. That's right. It was very comfortable. I was able to commute in, so I was able to go home at night and come during the day and set my classes, during a schedule where I could not spend too much time in my chair.
Well, if you're sedentary, going to school is a pretty good job because you just have to move from class to class and read what you're supposed to read and listen to what you're supposed to listen to, and that's all it is, right?
That's right. That's right. And DARS was good about sending note takers with me, and so
DARS, the Vocational Rehabilitation Services in our state,
that's right.
Provided you with somebody who would take a note for you. They'd sit next to you and make a note when you told them to please make a note.
That's right. That's right.
That was not unlike the experience that I had many years before at University of Houston. Now, as you began to acquire hours, you began to think about having a degree, and your degree eventually turned out to be in what field?
In finance. I ended up taking a business degree. Still didn't know what I wanted to do with it, but 4.5 years passed, and they were pushing me out, saying, "You have a degree. What are you going to do now?"
Yeah, and your answer was?
I'll stay in school. Otherwise, you have to get a job.
Right.
And I knew the job I would get with just an undergraduate degree wouldn't pay me enough to hire assistants and go with me, and so I started taking my MBA and my law degree at the same time.
So your MBA, obviously in business.
Yes.
You had a degree in finance, but you wanted to study law as well.
Well, I didn't. I thought I'd go ahead and do that. I thought, let me get my MBA and I'll take my law degree at the same time. But ideally, what I wanted to do is after I finish my MBA and my law degree, is get a PhD and teach, because I thought that would be a good job for someone in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. You could take time off. You wouldn't have to be in your chair very much if you didn't want to. You could write. You could research. And ideally, that's what I was planning on doing.
But you never got there.
I never got there. On the way to my plans, I found a passion, something that I loved.
Okay, so you finished law school what did you study in particular in law school at U of H?
With law school, it's pretty much just general studies. I didn't focus on anything in particular.
They had one of the best health law disability programs in the United States in the early 1990s. They still do, but it started there with Dr. Mark Rothstein and his wife Laura, who was the dean of students at one point. And did you ever have any classes from either one of them?
I did from Laura Rothstein. She was amazing. And they kind of set the standard, and they kind of set set the way things should work at U of H and at the law school, the way people were treated. It was amazing. It was an amazing experience.
Yeah. So you then got a law degree, you had an MBA, you had this undergraduate degree. What's next? Do you just start a business?
Well, no. When I was in law school, actually, I had the opportunity to clerk at some different firms, and one of the firms, or one of the lawyers at a firm said, "God, this is a great opportunity. Why don't you come work for me?" And I did defense work, so I started doing litigation work, and it was something that I learned that I started doing, and it was very interesting. I had an MBA, and I thought I would want to go do corporate law, and I did some of that when I was in law school as a clerk during the summers, and it was boring. I disliked it, and I started working on litigation work, on trial work.
Most people who think about lawyers imagine they spend their days either making speeches before courts or meeting with clients. Is that a true
I do all trial work, and I spend very little time in court. I spend the vast majority of my time preparing. And it can be fascinating because I need to learn to be an expert. I have a lawnmower fire case where a person died in Indiana, so I have to become an expert on lawnmower fuel systems. I have a case where a young man dove into a pool and broke his neck, and so I have to be an expert on pool design. I have cases where automobiles roll over and cars crush in, and so I have to learn everything I can about those type of injuries, those type of mechanisms, and so I deal with experts and learn that. So that was so interesting to me when I first started the practice. Is, each case provides a different set of challenges, and learning about that type of science and those type of injuries was interesting for me. And for me, it was beneficial because I already had a huge amount of knowledge in disabilities.
Well, partly your personal experience, right?
Exactly.
Does that play much into the cases? Do you ever say to a judge, look, I can tell you from a personal experience that this is the way it's going to be?
I try not to say that. I try not to say, Judge, I can tell you this is the way it's going to be. But what I try to do is lend that expertise and bring in the people that can say that. But it is a situation. My first job that I got hired as a defense lawyer was because they wanted somebody in a wheelchair.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about why that is. But first, we're going to take a break here.
Sure.
So, Toby, thanks. Stay tuned. And you all stay tuned. We'll be back with more Focus on Abilities right here on HTV. I'm Lex Frieden. Our guest today is Toby Cole, and this is Focus on Abilities. Toby, you practice law, you do defense work, and you represent people with disabilities, some of them with traumatic injuries like your own.
Yeah.
Do you see an advantage in being a person with a disability or having a wheelchair? That when you flash into the courtroom with your wheelchair, does that make the other side of the equation? Does that make them nervous? I mean, how does this work?
Yeah, I think it does. It's almost an unfair advantage in some situations. The first job I got was as a defense lawyer, and I do all plaintiffs' work now.
Okay, it's the other side that you're on.
I do the other side. Yeah, I learned. I got hired by big companies to represent them. They trained me how to be a lawyer, and then I was able to do what I wanted to do, was represent individuals.
So you flipped. You became the advocate for the person who was injured.
Yes, and that's
So you're able to intimidate the company that was responsible for the injury?
I try not to intimidate. I try to inform. And I think I'm uniquely qualified to inform them about their impact
Now,
on
have you
individuals.
really thought through that? I mean, do you purposefully discount the power of the image?
I think subtlety in the power of the image, and I think one of the things, if I try to beat people up with my disability, it works to my disadvantage. I did that once in law school, and a very smart lawyer came to me and said, you don't come across well when you use anger. You come across much better when you use subtlety. And so letting them know that there is power in the chair, and letting them know that in a subtle way, I think works better. And
well, the courtroom is a different stage, too. I mean, people don't cut you the kind of slack, or they don't see you with the same filters that they do in the public, probably.
Yeah, it is different. I noticed when we pick a jury, we have 36, or when I did one in Rock Springs, there were 95 people that we get to talk to, and it's the only time you get to talk to the jury. When I wheel in front of them and I sit down, they sit on the edge of their seat. What is this guy in a wheelchair going to say? They're interested. They want to know. When people see people in wheelchairs, they want to know what their story is. But we're taught in society you don't ask those questions.
Right. Do you ever ask the question of the prospective juror, what would your feeling be if we told you that this person was going to be in a wheelchair the rest of their lives? You have...
Absolutely. And I ask them. I tell them my personal experience.
Do you find some of them who have negative attitudes? I mean, it just kind of makes you...
I don't. The problem that I have, and I wish they would be quiet. I have people that will say, you know what, we just want to say we think it's great what you're doing, and I'm on your side no matter what it is. You're just an inspiration, and I want those people not to say that out loud because they don't get to sit on my juries. They get taken off by the judge right away. Mm-hmm. So the thing that I see being in a wheelchair and being an advocate for people that are disabled, in the courtroom and out of the courtroom, because it's a big part of my practice now, is I'm fully informed. Having lived it, having been in the community, having been a part of it, I think I'm able, when they are injured, and I can tell the company or the person that hurt them, I can tell them what they're going through, and they'll listen. They won't think I'm just some lawyer trying to raise the damages. They understand that when I communicate to them what these people are going through and what we go through, I think they take it a little more seriously.
Now, the Americans with Disabilities Act is not your specialty in law, but obviously it's had an impact on your life. You were 18 years old, and it's 24 years ago.
Yeah.
So ADA was passed before you had. Did you know about it? Did you watch President Bush sign it?
I didn't. I had no idea what this was. It wasn't until sometime later, because in 1990 we didn't have the internet to jump on and do research and see. We didn't have as much cable news that had it on every 20 minutes. And so it wasn't until later that I saw the impact that you had and the folks that you worked with had on our lives. And I saw, as time went by, the impact it had.
But do you ever stop and think? I mean, you don't know how it was before that, and there are still barriers. So do you ever stop and think, this thing didn't do whatever it was supposed to do?
I think about what y'all went through before it was in place, because even now that it's in place, it's just so misunderstood. I had a lady call me the other day. Her son is newly disabled, 17 years old, and they get a call from their landlord saying, we're canceling it, we're terminating your lease because we're afraid when you get back you won't be able to afford your rent and you're going to damage our property, and so we're kicking you out. And I think about what would have happened before 1990. What would have happened before you guys did this groundbreaking work, and that would have been okay. And so, and I see, from 1990 to now, I see how many things have changed. But I see how much more needs to change. And having that law in place that we have, that we at least have the tool to enforce, the rights of people with disabilities is just so huge.
So speaking as an advocate, as a person with a disability, what would you say are the next steps we need to take? What are the first things we need to work on? How do we need to do that?
I think education is so important. I think letting people know what we're going through and why we're going through it. I'm working with the rodeo right now. I had a bad experience with parking and getting in, and I called them up, and in a very nice way I said, this was just really a bad deal, and I know that you guys are probably by the letter of the law or complying with the ADA, but it was really inconvenient. And the experience I had with them was amazing. They've asked me to come in, they've brought in other experts. They know that the ADA is a start, but it's not enough. And so they are changing the way they do things to make sure that the disabled community is included.
So your advice is, when you see something that needs to be fixed, don't wait. Take action into your own hands and become a self-advocate.
And do it in a nice way. Don't call up and say, I'm mad at you, you're wrong, and I'm going to beat you up with it. Say, look, this needs to be changed. Are you willing to change it? And let me help you change it. And that's what I say. It's easy for me to call up and throw stones, but I need to show up and help people understand why it needs to change.
Toby, thank you very much for sharing with us today your personal experience and your philosophy about change, improving our community. And I know personally you're a great advocate. Congratulations on those things you've achieved. Good luck in the future. And if I need a personal injury lawyer, I'll be calling you.
Thanks, Lex. And thanks for all the work you've done.
Appreciate that. Thank you all for watching Focus on Abilities. We'll be right back with a closing word. You've been watching Focus on Abilities on HTV, and we're glad you have been. My name is Lex Frieden. I'm your host, and we hope you join us next time. Before we close today, I want to give you the answer to the question that we asked at the beginning of the program, and that is, what is the anniversary date of the Americans with Disabilities Act? That'll be July the 26th, 1990 as a matter of fact, and we're approaching the 25th anniversary, so please celebrate with us and Keep watching Focus on Abilities. Thanks again for watching.
Focus on Abilities is brought to you by Tier Memorial Herman, redefining rehabilitation, removing barriers, re-enabling independence. And the ILRU Southwest ADA Center, promoting compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act.